All right. Hey, what is up, guys? It is Coach Mac, Play Fast Football Tuesday night. Uh, another week of our weekly football talks. Glad to be here tonight on this Tuesday night as we get closer to the Christmas season, which means for most of you that are in the education world, we're getting closer to Christmas break. Usually get 12 to 14 days off. So a good time to kind of settle down, relax a little bit, unwind, get out of the teaching mode, get into your family mode, then get ready to start the second half of the year, second semester, get ready to close out the school year, get back into spring football, get ready for summer. The whole vicious cycle starts again. So hopefully you guys are doing well. Hopefully everything um, is going okay for you guys on this December 12th, I believe it is. So 13 days before Christmas, 13 days before the holiday season. So wanted to get a chance to get on here and talk a little bit tonight. The two topics that I wanted to kind of focus on tonight were defending tempo offenses on the defensive side of the ball. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about, um, you know, systems on offense and what's the best way to create a competitive advantage on offense, depending on the type of roster you have. Dive into a couple of the arguments that are going on kind of right now on social media with guys arguing about different systems and what systems don't showcase kids and kids can't get recruited from. So I thought we'd kind of split the chat in half if we could, or the live session in half. Half defense, half offense, kind of looking at a couple different things. So the first thing I wanted to kind of take a look at was defending tempo offenses and things that you can do to help you defend tempo offenses, things that we do to help us defend tempo offenses. And, I don't know, it probably depends where you're at and what part of the country you're at and the types of football that you see. That depends how much. Yeah, I think shifts and motions chasing is a good way to create a competitive advantage. If you feel like maybe your offense can't line up and just technique and skill wise beat people every down, shifts, trades, motions is a way to create that advantage. You're trying to get leverage, you're trying to get numbers, trying to get angles, you're trying to get all the things you need by shifting and trading and motioning to different sets to try and make it difficult for the defense to get lined up. You know, I've always I've always looked at it from the standpoint as, offensively, you kind of have the pen last. Your kids know exactly what you're calling. The shift trades and motions tell them where to go, how to line up, and the defense has to react to it. So, I think that's definitely a way you can create a competitive advantage if you need to. On the flip side of that, I've always kind of talked about on offense where, sometimes with shift trades and motions, you can only get into sets where you can only run certain things. To me, I think it's got to be a way where you can do that and carry your entire offense from it. I think there's certainly a way that you can do that. Again, when you shift, trade, and motion on offense, your kids are in formations that they already know. You're getting to them from different looks. They're ending up in a place that they should know how to play. You communicate to your offense the formations, the shift, the trades, and motions. You're calling all those things in your huddle or with your signal, and then the defense has to react to that. So I think offenses are definitely at an advantage with those things. Yeah, so wherever you are, if you don't have the size to beat somebody with um, physicality or to line up and say our technique is better than yours, then you've got to create a way to um, make it to where your technique can compete with them. And I think shift trades and motions is certainly a way to do that. If you can out leverage teams, if you can outnumber teams, if you can get them into situations where you can dictate coverage, then that's certainly something that you have to do. And that's, you know, one of the parts of that I wanted to talk about tonight and kind of a two-part deal is, how do you create that competitive advantage? And it would be nice to say that we can all line up in certain things and say, all right, look, this is how we line up. This is what we do. You're going to have to line up to it and you're going to have to defend it. I think that's obviously a great way to play if you think you can out technique or out physical somebody else. If you cannot do that, then you've got to create some different advantages for your offense. And the current argument that you're seeing right now, a bunch, I guess. Thank you, Jason. Diamond was very, very good to us. I think that one of the arguments that I'm seeing on social media right now, it just so happens that there's a big flex bone argument going on, and I guess one of the Division II teams in Texas, I think, is a flex bone team, and they're now in the semifinals or the finals of the Division II playoffs, and they're winning. And there's guys making anti-arguments saying that it's not a good system for kids in high school if they want to get recruited. You're not doing enough for those kids to get recruited. That's not the way the game is played in college. The counter argument from those guys is if you're good enough, you're going to get seen. The college, Harding University. I always get them confused. Mary Hardin Baylor and Harding University. I get those confused all the time. But thank you for pointing out that it's Harding University. And the coach came out and said, "Yeah, it's a good system if you really like winning." Well, my opinion on that would be I can probably go across the country and find flexbone teams that are 1-9, flexbone teams that are 2-8. So you really can't come out and say, "Hey, this system's really good," if you're serious about winning. Yes, Harding is winning. Yes, they're doing a great job. But to come out and make a blanket statement like that, yes, he's defending his system. God bless him. He's defending what he does, which right now is very successful for him. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with him as a head coach making those statements. Theoretically, though, philosophically, factually, there's probably as many teams, if not more teams, losing with the flexbone as there are in the Division II semifinals or finals in state championships. Can we go across the country in 50 states and find flexbone teams that are winning? Yes, we can. But you also have to throw into that argument, okay, well, how many flexbone teams are losing? And there's certainly a ton of those. So, I love guys defending their system. I love guys defending what they do. I am not a fan of arguing about systems. I am not a fan of saying that you need to be this, that, or the other thing on offense, defense, special teams. I feel like football is such a special game. And one of the reasons that it's so special is there's so many ways to skin a cat. You can look across the landscape of college football and see how different teams are on each side of the ball, and different systems, schemes, philosophies get people to different results. And, in the game of football or anything athletically, what's always going to happen is whoever is successful is going to be the flavor of the month. That's going to be what's hot. And obviously Harding University is doing a great job in Division II. So they've got a great argument, currently for flexbone. Now there's going to be 2 or 3 other teams that are in the semifinals, or if it's the finals, whatever round they're in right now, there's going to be other teams that are in there too. And they probably have a system that they can argue. So, if you got to a point where 4 teams in the Division II semifinals were all flexbone teams, well, then you've got an argument to make. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's ever really going to be the case the way football is played nowadays. I think whether it's 1AA, Division II, Division III in their playoff system, or, BCS 4 playoff teams, I don't think you're going to find anybody that is identical. I don't think you're going to find anybody that is completely the same. I think they're all going to have their own little wrinkles. They're all little, their own little versions of what they do on offense. And I think that's good for football because, that's what keeps the interest in the game. That's what keeps people learning is you've got all these different ways to play. And, based on where you're at and your roster and the types of football that you see, you can choose to play certain ways that you think give you a competitive advantage to win. And, whatever that way is, I really don't think it's right for people to say that you can't play that way because it's not good for kids. You can't play that way because, it's not effective. Well, if people play that way and they win games, then, who is anybody else to say that you can't play that way? So I've never really been into arguing systems, arguing you should run this or you should run that. But again, the flip side of that is I think when you look at any of those things, I can find any system that I want and any scheme that I want that is working for somebody. And I guarantee you, I can find a bunch of teams that run the same stuff and don't win games. So, the beautiful thing about football is there's so many different ways to skin a cat. But, the flip side of that is the same way that somebody uses to win a state title or a college championship, that same, system, theory, philosophy is probably also tagged to some 1-9, 2-8 teams. So, it's not all about the system. It's not all about, the scheme itself. Yes, that's what we fall in love with. That's what we want to do as coaches. But there's so many other things that kind of go into that, based on your talent, your roster, who you play. You know, it's one of those deals where, logically, when you look at it, okay, we can make the argument right now that there's flex bone teams that are winning. You can make the argument that they're doing some really positive things in the football world right now. But if we researched it enough, we'd find enough of the flex bone teams out there that are really struggling, that don't win a ton of games. So that doesn't ruin the argument at all, but it doesn't really factually do anything for your argument to say that, this is a system if you really care about winning. So to me, it's like, hey, that's your system. That's what you do. You're having success. God bless you. You're in the semifinals of the D2 playoffs. I hope you keep winning, but I don't think you can factually argue that and say that that's a system if you really care about winning. Yeah, fast, faster, fastest has always been great for us on offense. Speedball stuff is really just King. How you doing, bud? All those things are really just different tempo tools that you have on offense. So, you've got your base system of operating, which for us was always, fast in its own nature. The way we try to communicate, we were no huddle. Our verbiage and our communication was always very simplistic to where we felt like we could do it in a very fast manner. Faster would be, a situation where maybe you kept the same formation with very limited changes. Maybe you move, a Y off or a sniffer from the strong side to the weak side, but your receivers aren't really going anywhere. That's a way that you can play faster. And then fastest would be the same play, RPOs, access throws, the same play, repeat it, because now you're in a situation where if it's the same play from the same formation, there's no signals, there's no communication. You get up on the ball. As soon as they set the ball, you should be ready to run the play. That's about the fastest that you can play because, when you think about tempo, one of the things that you've got to look at is the communication of how the offense gets a play in dictates how fast that they can play. So whatever their system is to communicate, the simpler or the easiest way that is to do that with the least amount of signals or, the least amount of signals to a certain position group to tell them what they need to do to accomplish the certain task. That's obviously how you play faster, right? If your plays have multiple signals to multiple positions and the receivers have to get 4 signals and the tailback has to get 3 signals and the O-line has to get 3 signals and the quarterback has to get 4 signals. Well, every one of those, that's a hand gesture. Even if it's not a word, it doesn't matter if it's words or not. Even if it's a hand signal, each one of those is added time, whether it's 0.3 seconds, 0.6 seconds, 0.8 seconds. If I signal a play in, that's an open hand and that's a play. Well, if I have to go open hand, thumbs up, that subsequently will take another 0.2, 0.3, 0.4 seconds. So that second sign now makes it a little bit slower. So the communication process of a tempo offense is really the thing that kind of, narrows it down or boils it down to how fast they can play. So when you're talking about playing with tempo, if you eliminate signals and communication and you can get up on the ball and run the same play with multiple options. So like I would never say, hey, we're running pro eye toss right, run it 5 times in a row and just get up on the ball and run it. Because if they give you a look that's not conducive to pro right, toss right, you need to have an answer. You can't just keep running that play into dead looks, right? So it's not to say that you just have a system of getting up on the ball and running a play or repeating a play. It's more or less you have a system that lets you repeat a play that has multiple answers for the quarterback. So those are usually, run pass options, plays that have runs with the ability to throw it off that with an access throw or some type of quick game deal on the other side that can get you out of loaded boxes or man looks. Like that's the fastest way you can play any system. Like you can get into the wing T and call buck sweep and say, hey, when I say smoke, I want you to line up and run buck sweep every single play until I kill it, right? And I would have a sign, excuse me, go, go. So I would then have a sign or a signal to kill it, right? So I say, all right, hey, smoke, 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 get up and run buck, wing right, brown, buck sweep, run it again, run it again. We could do that. We could line up and do that and probably have some success. But if there's nothing else built into the play and the other team lines up with some type of 2 off the front side edge to the buck sweep pressure, now what is our answer, right? So we're playing faster, but we don't really have an answer. So when you're running like what I would consider speedball for, in our terminology, our philosophy, what we do, speedball would be a play that's built in that says, all right, look, this is, split zone with a, RPO to the 2 receiver side. So we're running glance to 2, fin to 1, and to the single side, we have a hitch or a fade depending on the leverage or the the coverage that you're getting. If it's press, we're going to run this. If it's off, we're going to run this. So now when the quarterback comes up the ball, to the ball to run the same play, he's got the box count. He likes the box count. He runs the RPO. He reads the extra defender, and we either give or we throw it. He gets up over the ball. He hates the box. There's pressure. There's 8, there's guys we can't block. He's got one-on-one to the single. He can throw to the single. That's how this in the speedball world, that's how you play as fast as possible, because it's not necessarily a dead play, even though you've called it before the defense is lined up. But the quarterback has options and things that he can do within the play that can get him out of it based on, what the defense is giving you. Now, along those lines, when it comes to tempo, and this is something that I talk about all the time on YouTube and other channels, tempo means changing pace, right? So, tempo in music means different paces. So, you have songs that go from upbeat to down to really melodic and really slow, but then really fast. That is what tempo is. Tempo is a change of pace. It's the pace at which you're doing things. So as a tempo team, you're not always playing a million miles an hour warp speed and snapping the ball every 4 seconds, because that has limitations also. The defense can get adjusted to that and they can figure out a way to defend that. And then you can't be as multiple as you want to be because you have to communicate so quickly. So, that is one tempo tool that you want to use, right? So speedball, or what I would call turbo, which is the same formation repeated, all the things that you can do to eliminate signals and play faster, those are all tempo tools. The pace that you play at, those are all tempo tools, right? So fast, faster, fastest, those are tempo tools. Being able to slow down and freeze to get into check with me, or to be able to change the snap count, or be able to use a 4-minute offense. Those are also tempo tools. Having check with me's built in at the line of scrimmage, where you call a fire alarm that's a really fast play, and your quarterback looks to you, and if the look is good, you give him a thumbs up. If the look is bad, you give him a thumbs down. He kills it, and you call another play. Those are all tempo tools, right? So there are different ways that we can play inside the tempo world while ultimately changing the tempo. That is what makes a tempo team what they are. To play at one pace the entire game is really, kind of counterintuitive and not productive for the offense, because the defense is always going to be able to settle in to that pace. I don't care how slow it is, how fast it is. If it's the repetitive pace over and over again, the defense gets a chance to settle in. You let the coaching staff settle in. You let the kids settle in. So to me, within a tempo world, the biggest thing is, how do I change tempos? How do I carry multiple tools to have multiple tempos, so that now the defense has to defend 5 to 6 to 7 different things? We're lightning fast. We're medium paced. We're normal. We're 4-minute. We're check with me. We're, double freeze, different types of fire alarm tempos where we can get up and snap it and run some type of action shot, but we could also get up and say, no, that's not the look we want. Kill it, run a different play. Like, to me, that's what being a tempo offense is. It's the variation. It's the different tempos. It's the ability to get in and out of tempos. That is really what you're trying to do. Now, along the lines of tempo, why would you do that? Well, if I feel like my roster can't line up and physically beat yours, I can't rely on technique and hand placement and double teams and you know uh, passing game structures or pass protection structures. I feel like off the bus, those things aren't in our favor. Well, I've got to find a way to create a competitive advantage because the one thing about football is there's going to be games that are lopsided. There's going to be games where the rosters aren't equal. The problem is you have to play that game, right? You can't duck out of that game and say, hey, guys, you take the win. We're not playing this week. You've got to show up and play that game. So if you have to show up and play that game, and in high school football, it's even, you know, it's kind of one of those deals where it's like, listen, as lopsided sometimes as college might be in the Power Five conferences, where the top teams and the bottom teams sometimes aren't even close outside of a major upset from time to time. Most of those games between the haves and the have-nots, even in college, they end up being 20 to 30-point games, right? Well, when you back that up to high school, it's even worse. The haves and the have-nots are so far away from each other that those become 50 to 60 point running clocks, right? So when you get yourself into those scenarios, you've got to be able to coach your kids and say, all right, look, guys, we can't line up and just be base all the time. We can't line up and do these things. We've got to find a way to make the defense come back to us. How do we make that team come back to us? Is it quarterback runs? Is it tempo? Is it option? Whatever it may be, there's got to be a way to make that team come back to us, because if we just line up and play dude on dude, roster on roster, we are not winning those games 9 times out of 10, 19 times out of 20, however you want to look at it. We're not winning those games. So when you choose your offense and your style, philosophy, whatever you want to call it, it has to have a way in there that you can give yourself what you feel like. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? It's what you feel like is some type of competitive edge to say, all right, look, we don't match up this week. We don't match up physically. We don't match up speed. How are we going to move the football, right? To me, that's what makes football beautiful. That's what makes coaching beautiful. But you're going to have to find a way to do that. And again, what I would say to everybody is I'm not here to argue how you do that. I'm not here to say, it needs to be option. It needs to be flex bone. It needs to be wing T. It needs to be single wing. Those are all different avenues you can go down, different roads you can go down if you need some type of competitive advantage, right? That's what it's all about. We want to be different. We want to put our kids in position to win games. And if we don't feel like we can line up and run gap schemes at you all night long, and we've got to find a different way to present the gap schemes or a different pace to show you gap schemes at, well, then that's what we need to do in order to get first downs, move the football, and score points, right? That's what we're talking about. So, I always hate it when I see it on Twitter or social media. It's again, wing T is almost different nowadays, right? It's 20 years ago, it was really more prevalent. You'd see it. I know as a head coach for me, when I first started in Florida in 1998, 1999 was my first season as a head coach. Those first 10 years, I probably saw 2 to 3 wing T teams on my schedule, and I had to defend it, every year. The last 15 years of my coaching career, I don't know if I see one a year. And if I do, it's really a lot. So what makes it interesting is the wing T is now different. The wing T is now something that people don't see. So that to me makes it a really, really cool offensive scheme. Right now, there's a lot of people out there in the shotgun spread world, the RPO world, the tempo world that are going to tell you that, the wing T is old. It's ancient. Well, it's almost so old now that it's new. It's almost so ancient that it's different. It's almost so, to some people, it's almost so boring that it makes it more entertaining now. So I know for me, defensively, when I have to face those teams, I kind of panic a little bit because it's not what we do. We don't see it all the time. It creates some issues. So there's certainly teams out there that are doing those things. They do them well, and God bless them for doing it. So, it's how you coach it. Coaches are more important to success than they take credit for. Yes and no, war sports. I think obviously we have an impact on the game. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. I think we have to control the controllable. There's only so many things we control as coaches, and then eventually players play. So you want to feel like as a coach, you are at least impacting the things that you can control. But at the end of the day, the best play call in the world against better dudes usually doesn't work. Um, if you look at some of those systems and now there's always going to be counterintuitive arguments like, okay, well, in the last couple of years, when Georgia Southern beat Florida, they were triple option. Teams have ran the ball on Alabama for a ton of yards in a triple option system. It's one of those things that you can always make that argument, but the military academies that are still running a lot of flex bone option football. Navy's 5-6. Army was 5-6 until they played Navy. I know Army's not true. I know they're not all true flex bone teams anymore. I know they all kind of and to me that is probably the biggest selling point to everybody, to let you know that you don't need to be an exact system, because I think even those teams that used to be by the book flex bone teams, even they dive out of their own realm a little bit and do some things differently. So, when you think about it, those two teams going into this week's game, they were both 5-6. So you have to look at the roster. You have to look at talent. No matter how good you do something, no matter how good you are at it, those two teams are 5-6. Is that a detriment to the flex bone or option football? I don't think so. I would never look at that and say that option football doesn't work. That's just not the way I think. But if you turn around and tell me that certain schools that are flex bone are unstoppable and these guys do such a great job with it and it's awesome, yeah, they do. But I can turn around and tell you X amount of teams that aren't very good that are running that offense, right? So, it's all about how good you are at coaching it, yes. It's all, about how good you are at calling it, yes. But the offense is a lot better when you're good and you've got good dudes doing it. If you don't have good dudes, then it's probably not going to matter, right? So, Army and Navy are pretty good at what they do. They're pretty good at the system they run. Why are they 5-6? Talent, rosters. Yeah, probably. They're at a little bit of a disadvantage with who they recruit and the types of kids they get. So, that to me would not be an argument to say be all end all, yes or no. That would just be the flip side of the argument for me to say to you, okay, well, yeah, that's a great offense. Yes, it's an awesome system. How come they're not winning more games? War, that's probably a good point. But if Kenny Wheaton was that good, they would have him. That's just my opinion. So, if he was that good at what he did, he would be at Army, Navy, or Air Force, because it's just like players, right? If coaches are that good, somebody's going to find them. I know we live in a world where it's about who you know, but if there's somebody out there that's that cutting edge running a certain system, and there's colleges that major in that system, I would think eventually you're going to find those guys and say, hey, there's this guy in Chicago or in Illinois that runs this system and he hasn't lost a game in 35 years. Maybe we should check him out. So I get it. Guy's probably great. He's probably really good at what he does. God bless him. But, my argument would be if he was that good, somebody would probably find him. I think yards per play is probably the best way to indicate it. Yeah, I think yards per play, it's the same thing on defense. We look at it and go, okay, should we look at points per play, points per possession? I think points per play or points per possession is a pretty good stat. But at the end of the day, there's only one stat that matters: winning and losing. No matter what system you run, no matter what you do on offense or defense, do you win, yes or no? And if you win, then all those other stats kind of go out the window. If you lose, those stats go out the window, right? So stats are what you make of them. Analytics nowadays gets crazy with everything that we look at, but we just live in a world where it's winning and losing, and you can get to a point where whether it's turnovers, special teams, whatever it may be. You may have 50 yards of offense and the other team has 300 and it's 7-7 or 14-14, right? Stats don't always tell the tale of the game. They don't always indicate the winner and the loser. It's analytically for us as coaches, it's the easiest way to evaluate things and go, okay, when I go back and look at my defense, I look at stats. There's no other way to look at it, right? Obviously, we were 6-4 this year. We lost in the first round of the playoffs. But when I go back and look at my system, I kind of look at, okay, what did we do against a run? What did we do against a pass? What did we do on first down? What do we do on second down? What do we do on third down? What did we do in this front, this front, this front? What do we do in this coverage, this coverage, this coverage? Because, for us, the numbers are really all we live by. It's what we have. That's how we base a lot of things. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, with all those numbers, did we win? Yes or no? If we won, then let's figure out a way to keep winning. If we lost, then it really doesn't matter what those numbers are, right? So, I think sometimes stat-wise, we can get a little bit carried away with the stats we look at and the things we look at to kind of dictate a system. You know, uh, I would argue right now in college football, in my opinion, I think Lincoln Riley is about as good as there is on offense as anybody out there. The season says otherwise, right? The wins and losses say otherwise. I would tell you right now, as far as play calling, structure, schematically, to me, the last 5 years, he's as good as anybody in the business. This year doesn't say that, right? Because the wins and losses don't say that. And it doesn't matter what else is out there. It doesn't matter injuries. It doesn't matter how the defense played. They struggled on defense. Okay, well, that's part of the game. So when you debate that, it's yes, offensively, you can debate who's better, who's not better. Defensively, you can debate it, but at the end of the day, the only thing that wins the debate is wins and losses. What are you doing to win and lose games? And yes, it's 3 phases. Yes, you have to be good in all 3 of those phases at that level to win. But at the same time, you're always going to be judged on winning and losing. So, yeah, you got an offense, a defense, or special teams that do a lot of great things and put up a lot of crazy numbers, but your record doesn't reflect that. Eventually, you're going to kind of go down in flames because you didn't win. It's just, I think he can still talk about his stuff. It's just that this season it wasn't very good. It's not, I don't think it's the schematics of it. I don't think it's the play calling issue of it. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. And it just so happened that it wasn't very good, for them this year. It didn't equate to wins. Defense had a lot to do with that, so it's just football. That to me, that's what makes football such a beautiful game. It makes football such an incredible sport to coach is because there's so many caveats that go into winning and losing. And, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how you win it or lose it. What people are going to remember is the end result, right? So if you win a game 21-20 and you have negative yards on offense, nobody's going to give a shit that you had negative yards on offense. Yeah, radio shows and other people that need to drum up information for a career to keep a show going, they're going to look at all those things. But if you won 21-20, who gives a shit if you had negative yards on offense, 0 touchdowns on offense? If you scored all 3 touchdowns on special teams or defense, points count the same. So if you win 21-20, really intrinsically, your staff, your offense, your kids, you're the only ones that know you kind of shit the bed. Everybody else can look at it and look at the statistics and go, well, God, they were miserable on offense. Well, shit, they won the game. So who really cares how miserable they were on offense? That's for the staff to figure out. Can you win games like that every week? No, probably not. But it really doesn't matter because if you win a game 2-0, 3-0, 3-2, 65-64, you don't get more or less points. Now it's debatable, obviously, based on what happened in the college football playoffs. It's debatable to say that if your offense stinks and you can't score points, you're going to get left out, kind of like Florida State did because they got a 3rd-string quarterback. Didn't play well against Florida, didn't play well against Louisville, only beat BC by 2 points or whatever. Like, at the end of the day, you're still winning games, right? So, drive concept. Dig and shallow start on same side. Is it better than shallow cross? Dig and shallow start on opposite side. Um, I would say drive is easier to read for a quarterback because they're coming from the same side. As far as the spacing, the stretch, and what you're gaining on the defense with when it's happening. So when the shallow and the dig, as opposed to the drive and the dig are happening, I would say that's the biggest argument. The spacing and the stretch that you create on the field, I would think is the debate. Um, if I was teaching a quarterback, I would want the drive and the dig to come from the same side because in high school, I think that's easier to teach. That's just me. Uh, 20 balls against us. They scored 14 points running clock, but he wrote some record. Yeah. So at the end of the day, um, kid catches 20 passes, but doesn't get in the end zone, doesn't have a ton of yards. You win the game by a running clock. It really, to that kid, it's great. Great job on you breaking the record. It's great for them to preach that they had a receiver catch 20 balls, but at the end of the day, they lost. So I'm with you, Coach Gardner. That's hats off for you for winning the game with all those stats. But you're the only one that that kid's going to remember that, and the school, they might remember it because it was a record-breaking performance, but you lost the game. That's going to that'll go away real quick. And if you really want to piss a coach off, talk about a record-breaking performance in a game that you lost. Go on social media and post that you had 20 catches for 180 yards, broke a state record. If you lost the game, your head coach is probably going to be pissed that the first thing you think about is throwing that information out there, even though it's a great accomplishment. So, work his eyes across field into the dig and shallow, making it more likely he will. Yeah, I'm not a fan of things coming from different sides. Obviously there's it's one of those things where I think everybody could argue the way they want to argue it, what they like, what they don't like, how it stretches the defense, what it creates. I've had more success running drive concepts than shallow cross concepts, but that's just me. What do you, Liz 119? What are you asking about Coach McNally play long to avoid head contact? Because I think everybody's trying to avoid head contact. I think we're all trying to do that at every position, obviously, to keep the game, the longevity of the game, to keep kids safe, to keep our neck out of conversations. I think everybody's trying to do that. I don't know what technique you're talking about as far as, blocking certain plays or whatnot. Yeah, that's going to happen all the time. Coach Gardner, we deal with it all the time, with our kids too. It's like, yeah, you played great. Yes, you're trying to get your name out there, but I don't know if immediately after a loss, if those are the things you want to post. That kind of, your coaching staff looks at that and says, all right, you're not really a team player. So no problem, JH. Just remember, research the school, get your information about the school, talk about the program, talk about what you want to do to help the program out. Make sure you have how you want to practice, your install, your philosophy, all those things. Don't make it about schemes, systems, and play calling, in my opinion. Unless the people that are hiring you, unless they want it to go a certain route and say, hey, we need an air raid guy, we need a run and shoot guy, we need a flex bone guy. If that's what they're looking for, then maybe you want to, get more scheme or more philosophy based as far as what you run. But I think when you're well rounded to say, okay, look, I want to talk about, I want to talk about your program. This is what I think. I've studied the program. You have these types of kids. This is what I think we could do to be successful there. Here's what we need to do in practice. That to me gets you more mileage in an interview. I don't think it necessarily defeats the purpose. War. If you're running shallow and dig, you're creating a high low. It's not really an east west, horizontal stretch, so to speak. You're not creating a left right east west stretch. You're creating more of a high low stretch. So, the timing of when those things happen probably can be argued, but it's really a high low concept where you're making a throw based on where the window is, based off of a depth of a drop of somebody as you are. Now, obviously, routes can pass windows and you can let a guy clear a backer and other things. But, to me, the high-low concept, where you're flooding the middle of the field with an underneath route, an intermediate route, and maybe a post route or something deep behind it, those all become vertical stretches or high-low reads as opposed to horizontal east-west, like a curl slide or a spacing concept where everything now stretches this way, to say that, all right, they can't defend it. They can't defend these three routes underneath when they only drop two guys underneath in coverage. So, but again, if you were to argue it or debate it, yeah, guys are going to say that the timing of the shallow from one side and dig from the other works out better. When we do get to the high-low, guys are going to tell you that they don't like, the drive and the dig coming from the same side for this reason. Guys are going to tell you they like it for that reason. The beautiful thing to me, again, about coaching is you have a chance to run it however you want and have success with it however you want to have success with it. Yeah, maybe there's a best practices or a best way of doing things, but there is no one way of doing things. So, you can go out and study concepts and say, hey, there's teams that run shallow this way and there's teams that run drive this way. There's going to be teams that do it really good that way and teams that do it really bad that way. And then there's going to be other teams that do it really good their way and really bad that way. So, when you investigate structure, schemes, philosophies, things like that, there's going to be cases where most of the time when you want to make an argument or you want to defend the system, you're going to go to the success of the system. And you're going to say, hey, look at what these guys are doing. Look at what they're doing and how they're winning. Look at all these positive things. But you never really look at the schools that are doing that and losing to say, hey, you know what? These schools are running this system. They suck. They're absolutely awful. That's not how you're going to argue something, right? You're never going to get your point across to people by saying, hey, this system is awesome. Look how bad these guys are, right? You're never going to do that. So, to me, it still comes down to what you believe in, what you want to coach, how you want to coach it. And then there's still going to be people out there that do it a different way and they're going to be successful. There's going to be people that do it a different way and it's not as good, So like you're always going to have a chance to go out there based on how successful it is and, flavor of the week. You're always going to be able to go out there and say, right now, this is the way that you have to do this because it's hot. Yeah, that's going to change in a year or two. If you let everything matriculate out, all that'll change in a year or two. And somebody will start running something a different way. Somebody will run something with another wrinkle on it or another adjustment to it, right? So that's what keeps football growing. We don't all run the same thing. We don't all line up in the same thing all the time, so it's like, sometimes I really don't know why people would want to argue things like that as coaches, because to me, that's what keeps us all doing what we're doing with the ability to advance our careers, because it makes us, quote unquote, better than somebody else or more hireable than somebody else or a desirable hire. If everybody ran the same thing, how do you determine who to hire and who not to hire? How do you go out and say, hey, we want to get this young upstart guy? And, especially like in college, if everybody ran the same thing, the team with the better roster is probably going to win 90% of the time. There's going to be 10% of the time where guys run the same thing and they do a much better job coaching it and they pull that game off. If Alabama runs the exact same thing as Vanderbilt and they play 10 times, I'm pretty sure I'm going to tell you what that result is. And I would even go a step further and say flip the coaching staffs, and I'm still pretty sure what that result's going to be, right? Just because the roster right now of those two schools is not even close. If the rosters get closer, now maybe you can run the same things, flip the staffs, and one staff will win more often than not because they're a better staff. Yes, I agree with that. But staffs can only overcome so much. Eventually, I watch a lot of Alabama games. I haven't seen Nick Saban make a tackle yet. I haven't seen him throw a pass yet. I haven't seen him catch a pass yet. I haven't seen Kirby Smart blitz somebody yet. I haven't seen him tackle somebody yet. So, at the end of the day, the guy on the sideline only has so much control over what's going on. Eventually, and that's as great as coaching is to me, that's the saddest part about coaching. I've never felt more, out of the loop than I do as a football coach. As a player, I felt like everything was totally in my control when I was on the field. As a football coach, it's, to me, coaching in general. I've coached football, I've coached softball, I coach weightlifting. It's the most helpless job in the world to me because after you make a certain call and after you practice it all week, the result of the play has nothing to do with you physically doing it. That's why, I still love playing golf to this day, because when I put a tee in the ground, it's me versus somebody else. And everything that happens has a lot to do with what I did. I control that. Well, as a football coach, I control certain things, but there's other things I don't really control. So, at some point it becomes so helpless to watch and hope that people are doing the things that you've worked on, talked about. But at the end of the day, when the play actually happens, as a coach, you're not the one doing it, right? So, for me at least, and I know people probably have different philosophies on this, but I've never felt as helpless as I do standing on the sideline. As an athlete, I've always felt way more in control when I'm doing it, right? Um, in a team game, it's tough to feel in complete control because you have teammates and you're trying to do your job. They got to do their job. There's got to be a trust factor there for them to do their job. But, to me, coaching becomes like the ultimate helpless feeling. Yes, we've done this all week. Yes, we've watched film. Yes, we've talked about it. Yes, we've talked about, it's one of those deals where, to me, it gets to a certain point that it's beyond your control. Um, mm, maybe, all right, maybe a similar roster. Um, Probably back in a day where before free agency you could keep a roster together. Um, I think if you look at the history of Vince Lombardi's career, though, you're also going to find a bunch of losing seasons in there. You're going to find, if you go back to, things that he did in college and everything else. I mean, and if anything, War, what I would say is, the exception to the rule is the guy that the trophy's named after. How many guys are there like that? So, you know, if you looked at that and said, all right, he took a losing team and made them 5-time champions with the same roster, okay, well, then that's probably why the trophy's named after him. So is it impossible to do? No. But tell me who out there right now today is doing it. Obviously you're going to bring up Kenny Wheaton again or whoever else you want to bring up. All right, well, if you have that argument for that guy and he's coached different teams and he's won with a roster against a team and then he flipped and coached the other team and won with the other roster, well, then you've got an argument. I think in the NFL, a lot of people would talk about how good Belichick is. Look at his record with Brady. Look at his record without Brady. He becomes kind of just a dude. But I think the greatest part about that, War, is everything that we do has a counter argument. So yes, come on, Spice. So if I sit here and I tell you that I think coaching to a certain point has limitations and it can be very helpless at times, and you say, all right, well, Vince Lombardi took this team and did that. Okay, well, that's one guy, right? There's, for every guy that we can say did that, there's 50 other guys that we can say didn't get it done, or a million other guys that we can say didn't get it done. I agree that play calling is an art, but I agree that play calling also can be extremely overrated. You take the best play caller in the world and you give them a certain roster and you go play another roster. I think that play calling kind of goes out the window at times. That's just me. Now, I've seen at a level where the rosters are close to even and coaches are, on staffs that are getting paid millions and millions of dollars. Yeah, I think you can argue play calling a little bit, but I will 100% agree that it's more of an art than the scheme is. But I'm also at the same point, as much as I'd like to argue for play calling and think that as a coach, I do a decent job as a play caller. Yes, I'd like to say that, but I've also seen plenty of times where you've got the exact play call that you want. It doesn't get executed. I've talked to coaches about that all the time. What exactly is a good play call? Is a good play call the result or the scheme against the structure? So if you call a play into a structure that you absolutely love and you've got leverage, you've got everything you want, and the play gets blown up for -5, is that a bad play call? If you have an absolutely shitty play called, if you've got power to the right, and they've got 9 guys in the box, and 7 of them are on that side, and you hand it to Barry Sanders and he breaks 15 tackles. Is that a good play call? So to me, that's an argument for a completely different time and day. What makes a good play call, the result or the actual play itself? How many times can you sit there on defense and go, man, I was in this coverage. There's no way they should throw that route concept to this coverage, and they throw it. Bad call? I don't know. How many times have you sent a pressure in where you had 2 guys running free to the quarterback, neither one of them get him on the ground, he ends up scrambling for 30 yards or throwing a ball for 80 yards for a touchdown? Bad play call? Well, I don't know. You had 2 free runners at the quarterback, and neither one could get him on the ground. He then extended, scrambled, threw the ball to somebody else. Offensively, it was a great play call, yet they couldn't protection-wise handle 2 guys that came free. What's the better play call, the offensive play or the defensive play? The result says the offensive play was a better play call. My eyes tell me that the defensive play was a better play call. You had 2 free runners. Neither one of them could get the guy on the ground. He extended and made a play, and they threw a touchdown for 7 points. Offense wins that snap. I get it. Philosophically, when you argue the better play call, was it the guy that scored points or the guy who had 2 free runners at the quarterback that didn't get him on the ground? So to me, and again, that's the beautiful thing to me about football is you can make that argument all the time. We could sit here and argue that till we're blue in the face, and 10 of us will say it's the play call, and 10 of us will say one guy got lucky, and 10 of us will say one guy had a better call but got out executed. That to me is what makes the beauty of football. That's why we do what we do, right? That's what we want to put our kids in the best situation possible with every play call that we make. But I know in my career, in my 25 years, I can probably think of hundreds to almost thousands of play calls that I felt like were really good, and the results were absolutely god awful. And then I can think about play calls that I made that were really not very good and probably the wrong call, and somebody bailed me out and made a play, and I got away with it, right? So, that's again, like most of the things we do in coaching, it's results based, it's results orientated. So, unfortunately, the result ends up, dictating whether or not something was good, whether or not a scheme was good, whether or not a philosophy was good. If you look at like Kevin Kelly and everything he's done when he was in high school and he was winning 95% of his games and he was scoring on 90% of his drives, the philosophy and what he was doing was really good. He goes to Presbyterian. He doesn't last more than a year or however long he lasts, and they get throttled. It's the same philosophy. It's the same guy calling it. It's the same play calls. What changed? Now obviously you can go a step further and say, okay, he didn't have a chance to get his roster. He didn't have the right guys. I understand all that. I certainly get all that. But the same guy who with the same philosophy that's doing all the same things at one level goes to another level and the results are the direct opposite. Does that change your opinion of that philosophy? Does that change your opinion of never punting? Does that change your opinion of on-siding all the time? I don't know. Obviously he just got another job in Arkansas again. He's back in high school football. Good for him. Hopefully things work out for him again. I think the stuff that he did was intriguing. To me, it's like, okay, well, let's look at those things. He never changed his philosophy. He never changed what he did. He went to the college level and got absolutely destroyed. Are there things that led into that? Yeah. Are there other things that were beyond his control? Yeah, probably so. But if you want to argue the philosophy and you want to argue, schematically what they do, you're scoring on 90% of your drives when you're coaching in high school. And then you're scoring on 10% of your drives when you're coaching in college, but you're calling the same shit. You tell me what it is. That would be my argument. But again, for every argument I make like that, there's a counter argument to it. So from the standpoint of things like that, I try my best. I'll give my opinion on things when I want to give my opinion, but I try not to argue with people because it's a dead end. It's a waste of freaking time. Like, how are you going to argue something like that? Here's my opinion. Here's what I think. Well, that's your opinion. That's what you think. I don't really know how we're going to win that argument. But again, that's what makes football so great to me is there's all these different ways that we can throw out there and go, hey, I do it like this and we win a shit ton of games. Hey, I do it like this, we win. I do it like this, we win. But ultimately what it comes down to is flavor of the week. Who's doing it right now with a lot of success and what are they doing? That's what people gravitate to. So, but again, the great thing is we can have those arguments. We can sit here and have those discussions. It's what makes football so beautiful to me. So I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. Do you get into some debates sometimes with people that get heated, or, do you piss some people off sometimes? Yeah, I'm sure you do. But hopefully cooler, minds prevail in the end, and everybody comes back and looks at both sides of the equation and says, okay, you know what, that didn't really make sense. That's a good point. That's not a good point. So, to me, that's the beautiful thing about what we do. Um, to me, P Block, to be honest with you, better is what you think gives your kids a better chance. Whether or not we can ever prove which one is better, I'm not sure we can. You can get guys up there that are experts on the topic and say, well, when you run it this way, these things are going to happen, which makes it better. And then another guy can come up there and say, well, when you run it this way, these things are going to happen, what makes it better. To me, you got to choose which way you think is better and, find out. Usually in something like that, I would try, if it were me, I'd try them both and say, okay, look, I want to run shallow with, the shallow and the dig coming from opposite sides. And then I want to drive with them coming from the same side. I want to see which one my quarterback likes better. I want to see which one has better throwing windows. And then that's the one that I'm going to use, but to say that one is better than the other, or, quote unquote, use the term better, I'm not sure that we can really do that. So, but we're going on an hour now, guys. I appreciate all the comments. I appreciate, again, phenomenal chat tonight, phenomenal YouTube live. Unfortunately, here's the good and the bad thing about it. The good thing is we never got to the defensive side of the ball. So now next week, that gives me another topic to talk about. I wanted to talk about how you defend tempo offenses and things that you build into your system and things that we do blitzing wise, to defend tempo offenses. But the offensive talk tonight was so great that we never got into it. So that's a bonus because I think it gives us a topic for next week. It gives us something to talk about next week. But again, appreciate everything you guys do for me. Appreciate everything you do for PlayFast. Thanks for being here tonight. Thanks for dealing with my cats running in and out of the screen and driving me absolutely nuts. Thanks for all the interaction tonight. Just remember, when we do something like this, there is no wrong answer, in my opinion. I don't think you can ever, I don't think you can ever put a comment down that I think is completely wrong. I might disagree with it, but I don't think it's wrong. And in the game of football, I don't think it's wrong because that's your opinion. You have a choice to do those things, right? So when I tell you that I think coaching can be helpless and a little bit beyond my control, that's my opinion. That's what I think. Other people might say, oh, no, I feel like I'm in complete control and I like it more than when I played. Well, that's their opinion. I want to play personally. I feel more in, when I play golf on Sunday and I swing the club, I feel more in control than I do when I call plays on Friday night. That's just me. That's how I feel. So, again, appreciate the fact that we can make these arguments. Appreciate the fact that we have platforms where we can do these things, because it gives us a chance to have arguments, have opinions. And luckily, we live in a country where we can do those things. So appreciate everything you guys do for me. Thanks for everything you did tonight. Again, if you like what we do on YouTube with PlayFast, you can check out patreon.com/Coach Mac. It's everything we do with video clips of us playing our stuff and playbook diagrams of us playing our stuff and how we draw our stuff up. To me, it's kind of, it's a better way for us as high school coaches to do things. I've mentioned this all the time before. I could get up and show you clips of Alabama doing different things. I don't know how much that helps. I know there's a bunch of guys out there that do it and they're really good at it. And I even look at their stuff and, I learn from them. So I'm not saying that it's not worthwhile, but, for us, me showing you what I do in high school with our kids and showing you what we try to run, to me, is a little bit more worthwhile than saying, hey, here's the, Breeze Creeper from Texas Tech or somebody else. That's just my opinion. So if you're interested in stuff like that, patreon.com has all that. Again, during the month of December, I got a special going on. I've got 10 or 11 virtual clinics that I've done on my site that are on my YouTube channel that I am offering up to people. $20 for all 10 clinics. It's up to 20 hours worth of football, offense, defense, a bunch of different speakers, not just me doing them. It's a bunch of different speakers. Noel Mazzone did one for me, and offensive line coach from West Alabama did one for me. The defensive coordinator from Colgate did one. Out of his football did one. So a bunch of different speakers, a bunch of different topics. If you're interested in that, email me, Sting8740, and I will type it in right now at gmail.com. So, it's one of the things that it's my way of reaching back out and helping you. It's things that are on my YouTube channel that I've done that I don't release to the public. So if you're interested in those things, over 20 hours of football, 10 different clinics, different speakers, different topics, email me and let me know. Hopefully, you're winding down. Hopefully, you end the semester and get the break that you need going into the holidays. We will be on at least one more time before Christmas, and then I will certainly be on over the holidays. So thank you guys for what you do for me. Thank you for what you do for PlayFast. Thank you for what you do for football, kids, the game, everything. Coaching is the greatest profession in the world, even though I feel helpless when I do it sometimes. It's the only job I've ever had. I wouldn't change it for anything. So, keep in mind, guys, you won't play well until you play fast. Thank you for everything you do. See you next time.